Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for another Why You Know review, where I go over a series of records that I wanted to do a full-length review of, but I didn't, gauntlet style, one brief take after another. You know what it is by now, you know the formula, you know what we do, so let's get into it. Transition ba-bam! This is a follow-up collaborative record to the Southside and Little Herb LP that dropped about a year ago at this point in 2018. I wasn't really wowed all that much by that project. It felt very smooth, very even, not a whole lot of standout tracks on it. However, in comparison, Still Swervin' over here is much more raw and energetic. I mean, there are some tracks that feel maybe a little too thrown together and lo-fi and faded and casual on the back end, to the point where it is hard to be enthusiastic about them, but I am appreciating the much grimier vibe of this set of tracks in comparison with the debut collaborative record. If you've been tuning out to a lot of HERBO stuff he's been dropping lately, don't miss out on this project because it's pretty decent, especially if you're looking for some really grimy, nasty, Chicago-based trap. As you guys remember, I didn't really care for the last Jon Bellion record because of the weird fusion of pop, electronic music, like Disney movie soundtracks, and rap music, and yeah, I'm still not really a fan of the same blend of electro hip-hop that Jon Bellion draws up on this record too. He gets a little more ambitious with some more layered production, and he buys himself some legitimacy by, you know, bringing on some old head type rappers that spit some hard shit on some tracks where the production is actually pretty impressive. I have to say, if he did an entire record of songs with features from guys like Rock Marciano and RZA and so on and so forth, and it was just Jon on the beats throughout the whole thing, I would probably like that quite a bit. They are the best tracks on the record, but once you get off of these cuts and into the, you know, mainly in John Travolta songs, it gets absolutely nauseating. Jon just creates the type of pop music that makes my stomach churn, and it's way too sugary, way too idyllic, and I want to have nothing to do with it. Was originally looking forward to this GIRLPOOL album. There were a few tracks teasing toward it that stood out to me, but unfortunately, I feel like the duo on this record has drifted away from the quirky and unique songwriting style that permeated their last couple of LPs. Sure, their previous records were a little bit too lo-fi, definitely not as cleanly put together, probably hurt any potential for widespread appeal. But now that the recording is better and their sound is a bit more agreeable, they just kind of sound like another generic, jangly indie rock and pop outfit without any personality. It's cool that they're making waves and getting a lot of attention, because I do think there's some solid tunes on this record, there's some decent guitar work, but overall the sound is really bland, and the standout personality that GIRLPOOL used to be known for is just kind of evaporated. Nobody needs this many Zayn songs, even Zayn fans don't want this many songs, stop. One of the most popular questions that has been thrown at me over the past year or so has been, hey, are you reviewing the new Street Sex record? Are you reviewing it? Why haven't you reviewed it yet? And honestly, as much as I did enjoy the style and the sound they were teasing toward on their last EP, the cleanlier vocal delivery on this new LP over here really hasn't done all that much for me, even if I do still like the dark and synthy and post-punky vibes and somewhat industrial vibes too coming off of the instrumentals on this record. There are moments where the singing on this album, it just reminds me of like some, I don't know, watered down Nine Inch Nails or Marilyn Manson or just like really subpar goth rock. Which is kind of sad. It's unfortunate when a record, there's one aspect to it that seems to just sort of rub you the wrong way to the point where the entire album kind of turns you off and it's difficult to get into the whole record. And that just happens to be the case on this particular album. So I don't know. Those are my thoughts. Disappointing, but I don't think for a lack of effort on Street Sects' part or anything. I think the risk and the evolution they presented on this record, it's pretty bold. I just don't really think it's been clicking with me. In 2018, a lot of people were highly anticipating this new Robyn album, and I guess I was sort of curious as well because it has been so long since she's released a new full-length album. Maybe she's going to come back with a new sound or something more bold and exciting. I mean, certainly Daughters did the same thing after waiting a similar time frame to come out with a new LP, but Robyn, this is easily her most forgettable album. These songs are bland. Like, I've never heard so much synth pop that just made me want to go to sleep. It's just so unbearably plain. I'm not really sure what else to say about it. I mean, there are a few compelling grooves on the thing here and there, but I mean, the vocals, the synth timbres, the production generally, it's just, ugh. It's just like such a, I don't know, just like a piece of bread and water. There's nothing all that thrilling about it, or sexy, or fun. And those are three things that should be characteristics of most synth pop albums. This new Laura Jane Grace album slipped by me because I really wasn't all that huge into the more recent Against Me records that have been coming out. But I do have to say, in defense of this album, it is a decent attempt at doing a singer-songwriter record, but with some punkier, harder, more aggressive sounds. It almost borders on power pop at some points. I think some people might be a little underwhelmed and unhappy about the lack of kind of a very overt punk sound and aesthetic that Laura's fans most likely expect from her years in Against Me. But if you kind of look at this record from more of a singer-songwriter perspective, just with some louder guitars, it's actually not that bad. Sometimes the lyrics flub and they're not that great, and occasionally, as Laura tries on a bunch of different, subtle genres of underground rock and singer-songwriter stuff, some instrumental palettes are blander than others. I don't think it's that bad of a release. In fact, I think the raw presentation of these cuts is a little bit more fulfilling than the cleaner and more primped sound of some of the more recent Against Me records. So this is a 2018 electronic project that I just ended up not really commenting on because after listening to it multiple times, I just really wasn't sure what to say about it. I was at a total loss and kind of torn. I mean, in one breath, I really enjoy the deconstructed club elements of the beats on this thing. I like the really weird grooves and percussion. I like that it's kind of reappropriating these dance music ideas and doing some really crazy stuff with it. And then on the other hand, there are a lot of sounds on this record that I find utterly horrible. Like just the sound of some of the synths, the sound of some of the drums. It seems like the intention is to pick the most unlikable and gaudy sounds possible. And I don't even mean like over the top in like a PC music sense, like a bubblegum bass sort of thing where it's really chirpy and blah, 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 blah. It's just heavily distorted, and sometimes it sounds like super experimental but also super cheap as well. It just sort of seemed like a clash of aesthetics that I couldn't really come to appreciate, no matter how weird I could sort of appreciate it to be on the surface. It's still something that I will probably reflect on in the coming months, just how odd this record was for me, but I don't know, just really couldn't bring myself to be crazy about it. This Lando Chill record is also one that perplexed me in 2018. There were some teaser tracks on it that had me excited as far as a very abstract and very left-field hip-hop record. Also, Mellow Music Group is a notoriously good label with a very consistently great discography. And not to say that this album is bad and that's why I glossed over it. I guess I just had a hard time wrestling with it and kind of coming to a conclusion as to what it was and what exactly it was shooting for. I mean, Lando is certainly a talented and a versatile artist because there are some cuts on here that are really hard-hitting, grimy, left-field, abstract hip-hop. There are other cuts that are more soulful and R&B based. There are other cuts that are just whacked and not quantized and very wonky and strange and surreal and kind of trippy. Like, there's a lot of weird flavors of hip-hop going on here, but I just felt like Lando consistently just felt lost in all of it. Like I was just trying to get a sense of who he was on this record and what this album was again, but there's just so little consistency to it. It's kind of like the weirdest, most left field abstract hip hop mixtape that jumps around so much it's almost bordering on frustrating. There were some lyrical moments on this thing that did have me rolling my eyes, like that Powerpuff Girl line or like the Obama drama line. There's a few, but mostly on future projects I would just love like a stronger sense and sort of like a greater presence of Lando's voice on these tracks, so it's kind of clear who exactly is guiding the madness and what message he's trying to convey with these cuts. As some of you who watch this YouTube channel may know, I've never really been huge on the band Big Thief or anything like that. However, there were some songs on this new ADRIENNE LENKER record that I found to be completely mesmerizing and beautiful. Sure, maybe as a whole project, it's a little brief, the material on here is scant, and occasionally it's a little too faint. However, if you are deeply mesmerized by the subtlety and the nuance of this album and you really dive into some of the guitar work and Adrienne's beautiful voice on this album, which I appreciate much more in the stripped back context, this is an absolutely beautiful little acoustic left field singer-songwriter record that you absolutely should not miss. So do give this thing a shot if anything I've just said sort of piques your interest. Legendary producer BLOCKHEAD is back with a new LP of instrumentals and collaborations, and while I was pretty excited to listen to this thing, I don't know, I don't think anybody but his most hardcore fans are really going to love this one, because it does truly feel like a mixtape of just like leftovers and what has landed on the cutting room floor. I mean, not only in terms of the variance and quality between the features on this thing. I mean, there are some standout ones like the Billy Woods feature and the A$AP Rock feature, and the Vic Spencer feature is actually pretty great as well as the instrumental attached to that cut. However, there's some other tracks on here like the Arm & Hammer cut, which just sort of seems like a leftover from an Arm & Hammer record. There are other instrumentals and feature-based songs on here that don't even really feel mixed or mastered properly, and they're significantly quieter or more lo-fi than many of the other cuts on this thing. So, God, the quality, the volume level, pretty much every characteristic that could go into a BLOCKHEAD song, the variations from track to track to track are huge. There's just very little in terms of consistency and flow to this record. Would have preferred something maybe a bit punchier and tighter with a better underground all-star cast, but if you don't mind something that's kind of chilled out and weird and a little cobbled together, something that paints a nice, relaxing, abstract backdrop, then, I don't know, give it a shot. Better Oblivion Community Center, a record that I was not anticipating talking about this year. It was pretty much a surprise drop, a full collaborative LP between Phoebe Bridgers and Conor Oberst of Bright Eyes fame. Who would not want to hear these two talented songwriting voices together on one entire album? I know I certainly did. The song Dylan Thomas definitely had me excited because it's like a really great piece of folk rock with some sharp lyrics and some kind of grimy, distorted guitars. It's got a nice attitude to it. But unfortunately, the vast majority of the material on this record outside of that cut is just kind of very milquetoast, folk rocky duet stuff. I'm as underwhelmed by this as I am by that recent Courtney Barnett, Kurt Vile collaborative record, maybe even more. So, I don't know, I was pretty excited going into this thing, but there's very little on this record that stands out, frankly. It's just very average. And a lot of the tracks on this thing are just too underwhelming and just very little in the way of chemistry between Phoebe and Connor. It has been a very long time since we have heard from BUKE and GASE, an experimental and indie rock duo that I reviewed a while back. I gave their last full-length record a pretty glowing review, if I remember correctly. However, I did not really get all that much out of this new LP, frankly. I appreciate the move they've made toward, I guess, a more pop-centric sound, something a bit punchier and groovier and sweeter on the melodic side of things, but I feel like every sound going into these songs is like the most obnoxious thing that BUKE and GASE could imagine, whether it be the nasally vocals and some of the distorted and very shrill synth bits and the pummeling pieces of percussion. Usually I'm not so averse to things that are this noisy, but God, this was a very I guess I'll just say annoying listen. I'm not really sure what else to say. I'm not trying to be too brutal here or anything, but really, truly, the sounds and the timbres of all the instrumentation going into this thing, I did not care for it at all. As weird and quirky as I enjoyed Buke and GASE's previous records to be, I just don't really care for the sound palette of this thing. Not one bit. Why? After all these years? Why? I was keeping an eye on this band after what they put out last year, which was kind of an interesting mix of modern metal and pop rock and rap and metalcore. And I don't know, I appreciate and I'm familiar with many of the influences that are going into this new Fever 333 record. It's cool that they brought them together, the sounds of metalcore along with a huge like Linkin Park influence on some of the soaring vocals coming out of the choruses, some slightly revolutionary, edgy political lyrics, but I can't really say I'm getting all that much out of it, honestly. I like the energy, I like that it's trying to say something, but the style of rap rock the band is bringing to the table on this record to me just seems painfully dated. They're kind of crossing the streams in a way that we didn't really have the ability to back when these styles were more popular because the audiences would have never had it. But now that they're here and now that they're together, I can't say I find it all that thrilling. Even though I appreciate the members-only series, and this compilation is not bad for what it is for a group of collaboratives and posse cuts diving into some modern trap and hardcore hip-hop cuts and some emo rap, the way that this is being sold and presented and marketed just goes to show you that labels will put XXXTentacion's name on anything just to get some streams off of it. Because while there are some decent cuts on here, the inclusions of X on this record feel just as awkward and as thrown together as what we heard on Skins. Plus, to say that he's presenting this thing, I think is really a stretch too far. After a week of returning to this MELLY album again and again and again, it's just pretty much another generic auto-crooner record. I'm not really sure what MELLY brings to this style that no other artists out there don't. The beats are really smooth and buttery. His voice is kind of obnoxious, but not so obnoxious that makes listening to it impossible. The lyrics are just okay. A few of the song topics are kind of weird, but outside of that, there's not really a whole lot of personality or anything distinct about this record. It just really falls in line, is incredibly average, and is barely even fun to listen to. And that is another installment of our Why You Know Review series. Thank you for watching. Over here next to my head is a playlist of Why You Know Reviews that you can watch, previous episodes and all that. Also a link to subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification button and do not miss a single piece of content that we put out on this channel or the Fantano channel. I will see you guys in the next one. Anthony Fantano, Why You Know Review, forever.